All right, welcome back. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, let's introduce you to our guest. We have the one, the only, the legendary Miss Day Al-Mohamed. How are you doing, man?
Hey, thank you guys for inviting me. I am super excited. I'm not sure I would have called myself legendary, but you know what? Shut up. I'm going to take it. It's a pandemic. We take anything we can get.
That's right. I got infamous, so you're lucky. I didn't get legendary. I got infamous.
Did you get inducted into a Hall of Fame recently?
I did. I got inducted into the Disability Mentoring National Hall of Fame.
So I think it counts for something, lady.
Oh, yeah. That's legend. Wait for it. Hope you're not lactose intolerant. Dairy. Legendary.
So why don't you tell us a little about yourself, the most famous award-winning person that you are?
Ooh, see, that makes me sound special, and now the bio is going to end up being real boring in return for that. So I like to think of myself as an author, a filmmaker, and a disability policy strategist. I've spent most of my regular work life as a lobbyist, but a good guy lobbyist. So I worked on hate crimes, education for kids, language preservation for Native American tribes, and spent a good chunk of time working on minority health issues related to the ACA. And then anybody who works in government knows how soulless and grinding it be. So you have to have some sort of creative effort. Not that government can be a little creative in some ways. Yeah. Right. We've all met that bureaucrat. You know what I'm talking about. So actually
I feel like that because I was him.
There you go. So actually I write science fiction and fantasy. I have a real love for alternate history and steampunk. So I have, I guess, 2 books out. So I feel like I'm just getting started compared to so many other folks. One is Bob Ali and the Clockwork Djinn, which I co-wrote with Danielle Ackley McPhail. So actually think Middle Eastern steampunk. And the other more recently from Falstaff Press, which is The Labyrinth's Archivist, which is actually, you could say Middle Eastern fantasy, but it's a murder mystery because who can resist those? So I have a lot of fun doing that. And then more recently, I've ended up taking that love of history and twisting things a little bit and doing some documentary film, working on history stuff, and more recently writing for PBS.
Oh, cool.
So it is fun, exciting, and a whole lot. And so they don't yell at me. I actually am one of a revolving group of amazing hosts on Adobe Radio's Geek Girl Riot. So a pop culture radio show with all the gals.
Cool. So the next part of the introduction, dear listener or viewer over there on the YouTubes, as they would say, is the how we met them. But I know Nick and I met or heard of you through Doc. So Doc, how did you first meet the one, the only, the legendary Miss Day Al-Mohamed?
Well, he's going to do this all night, isn't he?
Yeah,
I'm glad he reworded that question because I always feel attacked when he asks it. I'm like, dude, it's the same answer every week, bro. I met him through you guys, okay? It's like that old 80s Dare commercial, like, who taught you how to do this? From you, okay? I learned it by watching you.
So, Booze may or may not have been involved, but we were at Mysticon back in 2019, and your publisher, John Hartness, who is known solely for his
eccentric attitude.
Oh yeah, John's always great. He tells people on panels, buy my shit so I don't have to pack it. So
stealing my lines.
You know, he pulled me over and he's like, I want to introduce you today. You'll like her. She's great. You got a few things in common. And she's going to Dragon Con this year. So that's how I met. And he was like, so what kind of panels do you think you're going to put her on? John, I just met her like 10 minutes ago.
Right. We haven't even said hi to each other yet.
Damn, John, a little foreplay, bro. Come on.
I no. I know, John. No.
Like, we just met. You got to give me time.
But so that was how we met, and we got to talking about a lot of different things because we both spent some of our early childhood in the same region too. So, but yeah, so that's how I met, and then I was like, "Hey, I want to have Day on. She's great." So
Right. See, now there's pressure to be entertaining and funny and all of that kind of crap. And I'm like, seriously?
Ivy and Coy Day, we talked for like 5 minutes backstage. You are entertaining and funny.
So the other part of that is, like,
just go with it.
Certain publishing can be very insular to the section of it that you're in. So if you read a lot of space opera and that's what you write, you're going to know a lot of those authors. But because when we rebranded, we wanted to be able to do a lot more than just that, because otherwise you're interviewing the same people over and over again. That gets boring. So Cisca's been on the hunt for stories we haven't talked about before, just because it's different. So,
awesome.
And steampunk is fun. It's steampunk,
It
not
is.
steampunk. Oh, steampunk could be something that we could get some musical soundtrack playing when you read it. That could be a thing.
I have a really
I didn't know what music we would pair with it.
fantasy. I've been on a real fantasy jazz lately for non-European based fantasy. So, because so much of fantasy can be very European, which is great, but it's also been done a lot.
There's so many other regions that you can draw fantasy from.
So we've got to decide if we let you stay. So you've got to answer the religion questions, and there is a test at the end. All right, so Doc.
It's on you.
Star Trek, Star Wars, or Firefly? And I will tell John which one you answered with.
Ooh.
No pressure.
So yeah, this is where I have to admit I think Star Wars is only okay, and that's because I accidentally as a child saw Spaceballs first and thought that was the most genius thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And didn't realize it was derivative. Didn't realize that was based on something else until years later. So
that's an acceptable answer.
Yeah. So
never had it
unfortunately,
before.
yeah. So Spaceballs kind of kicked everything and kind of ruined it. So instead of,
but I'm totally
no, actually that is a solid answer. If that's how you were introduced into Star Wars, because that's exactly how you were introduced to Star Wars, was through Spaceballs. Watching the spoof of the original, probably if I had watched it in reverse and watched Spaceballs first, I probably would have thought Spaceballs
was the better piece.
Spaceballs is Dave's religion.
Probably. I'll be honest though.
We're gonna have to throw that into next questions. Going forward, we're gonna have to throw it in there. It's gonna be Star Trek, Star Wars, or Firefly, or Spaceballs.
I was also the wee kid who was convinced that I was going to grow up and marry Jean-Luc Picard. I just needed him to wait for me.
Thank you.
I'm straight as an arrow, and I was on that list. I was gonna marry him.
I was the kid who told everybody I wanted to be just like Jean-Luc Picard, only female and with hair. Those two distinctions were very.
Y'all want to take a guess who I wanted to be?
Janeway?
Yeah, with the beard. You guessed it. Good call, JR.
She was a ballbuster, so I just figured, go with it.
No, Riker, man.
I mean, can you strike the rum pose, though?
Not in this chair, because the arms don't go up.
No, so another religion question of the night is Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or Harry Potter?
Oh, I'm going to ruin that also. Legend.
Okay.
Tim Curry.
Tom
Cruise.
Tim Curry as the villain. Yeah, that was another one. Like, forget Tom Cruise as the hero. I was all about Tim Curry. I definitely did not understand he was the villain in the show at the time.
The amount of
he was so awesome and sexy, and yeah, I had to.
Have you ever seen the documentaries on all the behind the screen stuff? Like
I think I saw one years and years ago, and I really would like to re-see that. So.
Oh yeah, I love Legend.
So,
but
that's fair. I actually didn't see Legend until I was like a teenager. I missed it somehow.
Saw it in the theater. I'm that old.
Yeah.
I was in another country.
Although I'm going to be bad here because I've also you guys listed stuff. I'm like, I didn't confirm whether you guys were talking about the books or about the films.
Whichever one you want to do.
So it was interesting that my knee-jerk response for both of them was the films. I'm like, huh.
Well, that's because you do film too, my lady. So
that's true.
What about Labyrinth? Before we go on, what are your thoughts on Labyrinth?
Oh, who doesn't love Labyrinth? It's
okay, great. We're going to make me cry. We're going to relive my childhood trauma. Thank you.
You were the little brother that got lost and taken, weren't you?
Duh. I'm lost. I'm 40 years old.
I was going that the nightmares came from the Dark Crystal because I don't remember the story. I just remember flashes of the images or things like that from as a kid. And I'm like, nightmares, and there was crying. And
the horse dying in the Neverending Story. That was my first trial.
No,
hall
no,
on the
no,
back
no,
of the-
I'm not. No, no.
In front of a
We're
tree?
not
Yeah.
going there. Don't go
And
there.
they've ruined that at Dragon Con too. That kid running around with the horse head. Some things you just can't unsee and cry immediately.
I will admit the golden child scarred my view of oatmeal for the rest of my life. So ever since, if I have oatmeal or grits in front of me, I have to stir them like a minimum of 10 times before I'll eat them.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the traumatic hour now.
Okay.
You know, there will be tears tonight. There will be tears.
Well, that's why I'm wearing the glasses.
And see, I'm the terrible person. I'm like, I'm going to keep sidestepping your religion questions here. That is my plan for the night.
I'm going to sidestep your whole gig, man. Good luck, dudes.
And you said you weren't entertaining. So we love both the fantastical and the scientific here. But what was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
So first love was probably going to be fantasy because I remember as a kid reading The White Dragon. So Anne McCaffrey was my opening. However, my very first introduction was actually All Summer in a Day.
Okay.
And so science fiction was actually what I hadn't realized what had caught me first, but the first one I remember as a kid and had and like loved was The White Dragon,
which is science fiction, despite the banner.
That is very true. That is very true. So
see, Dare, you're outvoted off the island.
So you just brought her in to be a ringer for your corrupt ideas.
No, I brought her in because she's wonderful, talented, and intelligent.
Because she agrees with you, is that why?
No,
Nice
you
save,
don't
Doc.
have to agree
Nice
with me,
save.
but it does help.
Okay.
What is it that you love
I'm
about
going to back away slowly. Oh,
For when I have to do that, I try to throw a packet of Oreos out there. Seems to distract them long enough where I can escape gracefully.
there we
I
go.
love Oreos? So.
You know, I was thinking a spritz bottle. Psst, psst, no. Psst, psst, no.
That works for
Because you have cats. Fill it with Sprite, and I'll stick around and just with my mouth open. I love Sprite.
So, what is it that you love about this genre, the sci-fi and fantasy genre?
I think more than anything else, it lets us experiment with all the what ifs or the what can be's or even the what was's, because anytime you get in the real world, it's like there are these restrictions and limitations, whether those are economic, financial, imagination, any number of other things. And I think the other areas are just the opportunities for creativity, but I'm also a big believer that science fiction and fantasy and speculative fiction as a whole has done more. This is where I'm going to piss everybody off. Has done more to move society forward than any other genre. You know, we talk about all those NASA engineers who openly talk about how Star Trek inspired them, right? People who talk about the idea of safety equipment that they got from reading this or that book or this or that world disaster and things like that. That came from the imaginations of writers and authors years ago. You know,
my iPad and iPencil came from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Right.
And the fact that William Gibson says, I can't write this stuff now because some of the horrible, the dystopian stuff has happened. But the fact that people that writers and specifically science fiction and fantasy writers were seeing it so many years ago tells that there's a place for it insofar as forecasting in some ways, but also casting backwards in time, giving us new views on history, on human nature, psychology, like all of that, because you're able to step outside the everyday. Because a lot of times we don't want to talk about that in everyday. I'm like, I do not want to read another modern day book about how horrible the world is. Trust me, I have to live in it, right? But you put it in a science fiction or a fantasy element, and suddenly everybody's all about it, and
it's much more approachable.
It becomes escapism as opposed to reality.
Right.
That actually, and it's the inverse is we've pushed other fields forward, because I've actually met naval officers that got into science and became nuclear sub captains because that's as close as they could get to the bridge of a starship.
We interviewed a pilot who became a pilot because it's the closest she could get to riding a green dragon.
Oh, does the helicopters count for piloting, or do we just call them like? Okay.
You
Just
interviewed a
making sure.
drunk because it was the closest you was going to be to an entertaining artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something about that genre. The more people you talk to, the more you realize have done that. When you hear people talk about other books,
The
it's not
underlying,
quite the same.
theme of those types of stories is hope.
There
Hope
you
and innovation.
One of my favorite quotes, there's two quotes, and Anne came up with it to paraphrase it. If one man can dream it, another can build it. And she did that a lot in the Pern books, but also there's another author, Ringo, who was once asked why he likes to destroy the world and then write the story.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, why do your books work? Focus on the piles in the room. So.
All right. So what is your first memory of engaging in science fiction or fantasy as a genre? So basically, broadly speaking, speculative fiction. Was it watching it? Was it reading it, playing games in it? How did you discover the speculative fiction world?
No, that was the watching all summer in a day. And the idea of living on, what was it? Was it Venus? And the sun not only coming up for just a few hours or a few hours one day. And it was just, and all the flowers coming out, and the one girl from Earth who was so troubled by it, they had locked in a closet. I mean, it's bullying and stuff, but it's the idea of what it would mean to be on another world. But at the end of it, it's still all about how we are as people and how we interact with each other. And it's, that was my very, very first, like, vague memories of that, of an interaction with science fiction.
So how did your love of science fiction and fantasy transitioning into you writing stories? Was it merely to get away from the soulless, crushing world of bureaucracy, or was there something more?
I love to claim the soullessness, but actually the big thing was that's both simple and maybe not so simple as one. Longtime reader, loving all of that. But when I first moved to the DC area, and as a lobbyist, my wife actually had to stay behind in Missouri, and she was finishing off her master's degree. So we were going to be apart for an entire year. And it's like, well, what do you do when you live in a town by yourself? I'm like, my answer is to sign up for any and every class, group, workshop, whatever I can find to keep myself busy. So I started fencing then. I joined a writing club. I joined a book club. I joined a film group. Yeah, I kept pretty busy. So
wow, that's really impressive. And it makes total sense to keep the mind busy so you don't miss everything.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we know who's got the next question because he's got the glasses to match the color on the outline.
I do that so I can I remember. My Lord, you make me sound like an imbecile, which I am. You're not wrong, but we don't need to just keep putting a spotlight on it.
You're our favorite super grunt.
Well, at least I don't have to lift anything heavy on this one other than this question, which is many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. Were there anything specific, formidable moments that really shaped you as a storyteller?
Man, I never can think of anything awesome or exciting to say to that. I'm like, no, I'm a pretty nice, dull, boring person, and that's how we're going to tell it. No, actually, the most fun thing probably would be the Labyrinth's Archivist that I wrote for Harkness. Was originally I wanted to have a murder solving character, but I'm like, I'm going to make this character blind. And she's a blind woman. I'm going to have her be a blind woman of color, and she's queer. And that was a note. I said, this is what I'm going to do with this character. Is that okay? Note back. Oh yeah, sure, sounds good. Look, send the first chapters. We'll see if it's any good.
Did he say make it entertaining and it's all good?
I got and I sent the first chapters. Got a note back. I'm okay. Go ahead, finish it. I'm like, yes. Which is kind of awesome because it's not the first time that I know many folks have put forward a character that's a little bit outside the norm and have gotten very firm, very quick. No. No. Yeah. We're gonna have a blind character. No, it's not gonna work in a fantasy science fiction. No. And I'm like, hello, I'm a blind person. I can make it awesome. There are things that people don't know that would make it work. So
we just need to get you those Geordie LaForge glasses and your problems will be solved.
No.
we go.
If we're gonna do a blind character onto a real life human being, I have Matt Murdock, aka the Daredevil's sunglasses, who's my favorite superhero of all time. I've talked about it on every episode. I don't care if it's even related.
He doesn't. He
He
really
does have really cool sunglasses, though. If I'm going to wear anything, I'm going to wear those versus a hairband.
You like
So-
my Ednas for my Tony Starks?
Though I will admit, one of my absolute favorite characters in sci-fi is a disabled character from Louise Master Bijold and her Miles Verkosigan saga.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's kind of hard to not love him, but yeah,
it's
just
just
fun.
My poor bank account, more books.
Yeah, there goes. Yeah, it's a big list. So yeah,
It really is with these two guys, especially Cisca. She's like, "Hey, did you read this? I read it like 2 days ago. When did you get it? 2 days ago."
it's not my fault. I have audiobooks, and then somebody challenged me to a reading contest between now and August. Game on.
I'm gonna hurt those people because we got to keep up because we end up interviewing them.
All right, the military question's next, Nick.
Oh my
You
lord!
got this. You were born
Oh,
for
I know,
this.
I do. I was born for this. Maybe.
see, it was like we were all good though. We could stick. I am perfectly happy to like we can talk Daredevil all day if you like. I am in on the I'm in on the
Look at
Daredevil.
the hat, lady.
Daredevil
I
panel.
will talk.
We will
we will totally railroad this episode. It'll be just the Daredevil.
take it
day
on.
Nick talking about it.
There we go.
God, I love that character.
I mean, we could come up with other panel ideas on superheroes. We know that's your love, Nick.
But
Yeah.
Have her
today we're
back.
here to make John
Today we're gonna-
Hartness happy by pimping your book.
Yes, that's what we're doing. We'll have to do another episode. I think if we did a Daredevil episode, that'd be really great to have Day on.
Fine.
We can
We'll
go
do a
fact versus
virtual
fiction.
episode. We'll have Day on. You get to figure out the questions. But
Cool.
bam, voluntold.
Boom! Nick is happy. Boom! Question 12.
There we go. I can talk about what parts of the fight scenes actually are doable by blind people. The fact that man goes through so many canes because every time I have to do something so heroic, he throws it away. Those are about $40 to $60 a pop, and it's a pain in the ass to keep buying them. So, yeah.
Well,
just saying.
yeah, they are, especially the stuff he has made out of.
Right? It throws him away.
They're
Throws
not
him away.
$40 a pop for him. That's a $250 prop piece. Let me tell you.
See?
Nick.
Oh, yeah. We should probably do the real question now.
Hey, I'm just back and forth with the guest here.
I know you're all excited and it's adorable.
I am. I'm like a cute little puppy and everything.
I mean, I don't know. I go so far as to say cute, but go on.
I was just about to ask the question, JR. Can I be in charge for a bit? Thank you.
No.
That sounds about right. Speaking of military science fiction, your bio mentions that you served in the U.S. Coast Guard in the auxiliary, right?
I do. I'm a local flotilla staff officer with the flotilla 2401 in Silver Spring. Like, hi guys. I actually do information services for them, and I've done communications at the district level. So, yeah. So we basically do a lot of the backup and public work with the Coast Guard. Basically, they're the smallest and yet have probably one of the largest jobs. If you think about the length of our coastline and their expanding duties, including stuff under that addresses terrorism. So a lot of our guys will take over basically anything that the Coast Guard does except law enforcement and drug interdiction.
Yeah. No, that's really cool.
Do you get to wear the cool outfits with the little Dixie cap?
That's the Navy.
Coast Guard has the same uniforms, basically.
They wear blue utes and a ball cap, bro.
I was going to say our ODUs are blue, and they actually did a recent changeover for those. But yes, it is a voluntary uniform service, and it has to meet the same requirements as active duty as far as appearance. I think the biggest difference is our buttons are silver, where theirs are gold. So that we refer to the active duty as gold side, we're the silver side.
Oh, okay.
So,
Awesome.
I do have a Dixie cap, but yeah, that's not my preferred cover. Never looks good. Most uniforms don't look good on women. They're not made for curves. So
No, I
don't know why.
when I was in training, the first time somebody saw me out of uniform and in civilian, and came up to me and they looked at me the next day because they got and everybody was waiting for this person to say something horrible, and he goes, I just wanted to tell her she wasn't fat. Thanks, dude.
Ouch.
Because if you
Accurate.
are the uniform is not supposed to show silhouette the female figure, and if you are a
That's sexist because it silhouettes the male figure.
So it makes us look like little rectangles.
I don't
There's
normally.
I heard a female sailor say that it gave them a sea bag ass.
I am not touching any of this with a 10-foot pole.
No,
I'm just-
And she meant that in the most derogatory way possible. Like, she was unflattering. She goes, "It gave me a sea bag ass. It was horrible. I hated wearing it."
I looked at it and I went. It looked like my. We lived in the Middle East, and so my dad somehow picked up the term Omar the tent maker, and it looked like Omar the tent maker had made my uniforms, particularly when I was pregnant. Oh dear God!
Oh, maternity uniforms. Those
maternity uniforms.
No, yeah, nope.
Let's give them scrubs and put camouflage on it. That sounds good.
Yeah, but I love the guys that I work with, both men and women, and I love the fact that things like we have one guy who every weekend would go do radio operations over at Annapolis because a lot of the activity, they'd go out on patrol, they'd come home, but there wasn't enough manpower to man the radios. And so he was there doing it every weekend. That way they could have a chance to go home and spend some time with their families.
Oh, so, cool.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason I think it's how about this? I believe volunteering and service for your community, country, all that is super, super important. So this is my way of doing it. So these guys do get a chance to go home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if you didn't know about that and you live near the coast and you have some free time, consider volunteering.
I agree. Please do that. We need more of that in this world.
So,
going back onto your service, do you feel that your time in the Coast Guard Auxiliary influenced any of your stories? And if you drew any people that you actually knew from that time, did you put any people you knew in your stories? Yes,
actually, I have a short story that went out several years ago. Oh God, actually, no, there's I have a couple of stories that actually. Nope. Okay, yeah. The more I think about it now, I'm like, yes, I actually have several stories that involve the Coast Guard. The one that's most directly influenced is in Apex magazine, I believe, from a few years ago, and it actually was about the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, and it was the first all-black lifeguard station. Is the real story, and I basically steampunked it up into steampunk historical instead about the most famous rescue of the all-black life-saving crew there, and their most. I basically did a variant of what was their most famous rescue, and of course in the steampunk, it's all supercharged and things like that. And then I'm like, I had to actually write a post about this is what really happened, which was so amazing. That I couldn't put in my fictional story because nobody would believe it. And it's great. It's the fact that the down there on the Cape there, it was so rough on the storms. They couldn't get a line out. And so basically one of the men swam out. And because they weren't able to get the rope system so people can just slide into land, they swam out there and rescued people one by one. 9 times this guy swam out there. And I'm like, 9 times in the middle of a storm, and then bringing people back that way one by one. So yeah, it was amazing. So
that's what always surprises me, given all the crap that we get from Hollywood these days, and you get stories like this. It's like, why didn't you just tell that story? It's right there for you. You didn't have to do any work. Like, there's so many cool stories like that.
Yeah, I love doing that. One was a lovely Coast Guardsman who unfortunately crossed the bar, and I wanted to do a superhero story, and I actually put him in one as a was it that second strength superheroes who the real superheroes fight the bad guys, right? But while they're destroying the city up above, he was part of the team that would go in and rescue the bystanders who are caught in the rubble. And cool. it was very fitting for him, and I wanted to memorialize him in a way. So
that's really awesome. So do you ever pull from the people? Well, actually, you just kind of answered it, that you do pull from people that you know.
So given your exposure to the military, does it affect the way? Oh, that was Nick's question. He's back. We thought your Wi-Fi went down.
Oh, I mean, that does happen, but it hasn't happened in a while.
All right. Well, next question is Nick's.
All right, I'm assuming it's question 19.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Those all.
No, 14.
14.
I don't do the math. Public school math, people. Public school math.
Okay, that's hurtful.
There is a reason you guys don't do science.
You said 14?
Yeah. So do you ever draw, like, does your experience in the military affect the way you engage stories as a consumer? So the way you view movies.
I am on the wrong script, my lord.
Okay, I already asked.
Had not updated on my end.
That explains so much about Nick.
Because I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I just asked 14.
So does that's why we wanted you to update it.
JR, just continue while I take a minute to pull my head out of my fourth point of contact.
So does your time in the Coast Guard Auxiliary affect the way you engage stories as a consumer? Because we've talked about how it affects you as a writer and a content creator, but what about as a consumer of such content?
I would assume so. The coarse and easy answer is that the more you read, the more things you experience in life, the more it changes what you read and how you read it. And I learned, do not go back and read some of those childhood fantasy and science fiction favorites. They do not always hold up well to rereading as an adult. So, yeah.
Okay, Doc, the next question is you.
Yeah, sorry, guys. That was a quick, easy answer on that one.
No, that's okay.
I'm sorry. I disappeared for a second for reasons.
Oh, dear.
Without telling anybody.
Don't worry about
If anything's going to happen, it's going to happen while we're on the air. So it's Murphy's Law in effect.
All right, Doc.
I had the headset on. I was listening to everything, though.
Transitioning a bit away from that. Let's talk about things from a fan angle. Have you ever had anybody ask you for your autograph out in public, away from a convention or regular book signing event?
I have had somebody ask for my autograph, but it was actually not as an author. I was actually asked for my autograph by a very lovely, goodness, I want to say she was 8-year-old, because I was a fencer, actually.
Those are the most adorable fans ever.
I know, and it's just for the because I was a fencer. So
and she means people with swords. For all of you people out there, she's not actually like taking.
She's not hawking watches or anything.
Yeah, she's not.
There we go.
He's way too cool for that shit.
Yeah,
She means swords.
you guys want something?
Hey,
Now, did you do?
y'all want some
strip
literature?
Did you do strip fencing or collegiate fencing? Like the strip collegiate fencing or like fencing in the round?
Sport. I do sport.
So for people who don't know, because I know I just threw out a bunch of
strip
terms.
fencing.
So it's called strip fencing or sport fencing or collegiate fencing, and that's what you see like at the Olympics.
Yeah. So Olympic style fencing.
Yeah. So I did
And what's
fencing.
the other kind?
What? The other
What's the other
kind?
kind?
I'm getting to that. The other kind is called fencing in the round, and it's more like what you see at like an SCA event or a Georgia Ren Fair, or like in the Robin Hood movies or the Musketeer movies. So, and that's what I did. So I always think it's great that when I meet other fencers.
And which one do you do, Dave?
So I have fenced all 3 weapons and have been rated in all 3, but currently I actually fence foil
foil makes me nervous.
Just for the audience at home, what are the other 2? There's the foil and what else?
So there's foil, epee, and saber. So foil is based on the old European small sword. So it's the target area you're only trying to hit is the torso, right? I just want to kill you. That's what I'm after. Right. Epee is based on what would be the old dueling sword. So whoever hits first wins, first blood. So you can hit anywhere on the body. And the last one is saber, which is obviously based off what would have been cavalry, but most of them now are more the traditional dueling saber.
Where would a rapier fall into those 3?
So rapier, it depends on what you're talking about. It's probably closest to epee would be my guess. But
Yeah,
historically, it'd be a little bit of a heavier weapon.
See, epee always scares me because I've known people in the SCA, like now it's much safer, but when they first started doing fencing in the SCA, there were a lot of epees, and epees break and they break sharp when the blade breaks. And that part scares me because I've heard stories of it getting people and cutting them.
Well, yeah. If you think about it, nobody's going to be swinging a sharp blade. So if I swing something at you, it's going to be like swinging you with a bat. So it's going to cut, but it's not going to be that bad.
Yeah.
Anything with a point is going to take a lot less pressure. So what?
Yeah.
Three to 5 pounds of pressure to pierce you, and you only need about 3 inches to get almost any organ in the body. So it wouldn't take much to do that.
The SCA now, they use schlagers, which are the blade is more of an oval shape, and it breaks when it breaks flat. So it breaks on a blunt.
And over the last few years, there have been a lot more shops that actually are building these things in ways that are flexible enough to break well. But that was my experience was being asked for that. I actually fenced in the 2019 U.S. Fencing Nationals in women's vet 40, and am currently number 7. So they didn't have them last year.
Congratulations!
And if I can qualify, we'll see how I end up this year.
So when she writes sword fighting scenes, it's legit.
It's legit.
There we go. And that's my usual thing about when people talk, and you'll hear about a lot of stuff about disability, and I'm rah-rah on that as a disabled woman, because a lot of folks are like, well, I can't make a disabled character or a blind character because it limits what they can do. And people get all these weird ideas. And my usual response is, I'm like, unless one of you guys is number 1 through 6 in the US on fencing, I will whoop your ass. So, and as a blind person, I will whoop your ass. So that kind of negates the idea, and it's kind of trying to break people from the limited thinking about what is and isn't possible, especially when it comes to creating fiction.
So as grunts, Nick and I, I'm sure when we engage in content, be it comics, movies, or books, and they get the gun stuff wrong, we generally were like scream at the screen and throw things. And is it the same with you in sword fighting and like books?
No, I'm on medication for that now. I don't throw as much.
Yeah, you don't break the TV. Don't break the TV.
Don't break the TV.
Actually, there's actually a lovely group of us who met through SIFWA, the Science Fiction Writers Association, and it was at the Nebulas last year. And we actually put together a whole panel, and all of us had disabilities, and all of us do studied work. Some of them fenced around to do He-Man historical. Some of us do Olympic style. And what happened after is all of us ended up with a big old discussion about all the things that we had seen that was awful. And so basically what happens now is when we watch, there becomes there's this stream of text messages back and forth about what bullshit something is. So rather than throwing things, we just go on angry rants back and forth. There's nothing like finding your people that you can then grump with over.
Did you just see this? Did you see this? Did you see what horsecrap this was?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
So did you watch The Witcher and like scream? I've heard some sword people got mad at that.
It is not great. It looks pretty though. I will say how about this? For sword choreography, it is beautifully done. How about that?
I like the positivity.
Beautifully done as Henry Cavill's abs.
Okay, Doc.
Because there's some things where I go, yeah, you got to make it flashier for television, and if you've got a good stunt coordinator, a good fight coordinator who actually knows good sword work, it can be beautiful. And The Witcher had really beautiful fight scenes, not always realistic. I'm like, don't turn your back. Oh, don't spin like that. No, spinning, that's always a bad idea. And then I love the old. It's not that. Yeah, it's pretty old now. But Zorro has beautiful fight sword work. Beautiful. Nothing I'd ever want to do in real life. But
the movie or the black and white TV series?
Movie.
So have you ever spotted anybody in the wild reading your books?
I have not, but that would probably be for the obvious reason that I don't see past the nose on my face because I'm visually impaired. So no, I have not seen anybody reading my book. And nor am I famous enough. Someone's like, hey, psst, look, I'm reading your book, which would be really cool, actually. So anyone out there listening to this, if you recognize me and you're out there and you have a copy of my book, lie to me. Come up and say, look, I'm reading your book. I'll buy it and it'll be awesome. You will make my day.
So it would be kind of like people would be calling the cops and restraining orders if you try to get close enough to basically see if they were reading it. Is what you're telling us?
Probably, yeah. Shh.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm
we
close
had that
enough
incident with Elon Musk. He got real mad. We were outside his window. I don't know what that was about. We just wanted to get him on the show.
Yeah, that's probably not the best way to do it. You start by sending letters and postcards, then you move to phone calls, then you move to being outside the window. You have to slowly ramp up to it, get them used to it.
Where were you 2 years ago? Come on, jeez.
I jumped right into sending pictures of my dogs to Elon Musk. He was not impressed.
Okay.
See, I broke Cisca right there.
First time we could answer that question. It wouldn't be the first time. I've seen your mug. So, what is the weirdest or funniest interaction you've had with a fan since you started writing?
I can't think of anything. I think I've been the weird fan. Yeah. You know, when you meet somebody and you just, and you've got tears started and you want to see something deep and meaningful, and the only thing that comes out is like high, but the high is like 3 octaves higher than it should be. And that would be me the first time I met Gail Simone. Yeah.
I had one where I literally was trying to do that. I was doing this. And okay, so you don't see it, and I'm sorry. I was sticking my index finger into the palm of my other hand like I was pressing a button. Like I'm pressing a reset button in my brain. And that became the universal Cisca's brain's not working. And ever since, my friends have been like, why don't you go press your button?
Yeah, no, mine's the squeaky. Sign my book. So I've been a longtime fan of her writing on Birds of Prey, The Punisher. I
love Birds of Prey.
Yeah, so she brought that series back and made it into something really meaningful, and just she had a great run on Wonder Woman. I'm trying to think, and I blanked on it. The woman in the bikini.
Didn't she write for RoboCop? I see that on her IMDb page.
Ooh, I have not read her RoboCop, and I have her full run on. I blanked on the character's name, the female version of Conan, which is going to get me in so much trouble.
Red Sonja, no, not Red Sonja, but
Red Sonja. Sonja.
Yeah.
I never saw Red Sonja.
She actually made a very awesome, fun
Blasters and Blades podcast. You've never seen Red Sonja, never read Red Sonja.
No,
I'm gonna chastise you off camera.
Yeah,
I have read. There's so many books.
How about this? If you're going to read Red Sonja, I would highly recommend you start with Gail Simone's run on the character.
Okay, I will. Challenge accepted. I have to read a book occasionally for Nick because I make him read a lot of shit.
It's really good writing.
And I have the Edna glasses. It reads it for me. Feeds right into the earpiece. It's very high tech.
I want that.
I do too. I just totally made that up.
Yeah. But yeah, well, so that's my fan thing. Yeah, but that's my fan example. But here's the sad part. I have met her several times since then. It has not gotten any better each time. So I continue to be this weird stalker with, a high-pitched hi. And yeah.
Okay, so you're saying in person you're not a fan, or
the
interactions didn't go the way you wanted them to, or?
Oh, I think it's more that I can't say anything meaningful, so I end up squeaking and not being able to say very much. And it's like, I love your stuff. It's like one of my favorites, and you inspire me, and all that kind of stuff. And
it happens. I'm a huge fan of Jim Lee. I got to meet him a couple of years ago. Similar thing happened. He's like, hey, who's that on your shirt? And I'm like,
exactly. Now the thing is, though, the next time you met him, did you do the same thing? Because I've done this 3 times now. So
no, that was the second time I met him. The first time I met him, it was 1988, so I was 10, and I was just a little baby ranger, Nick.
Aww.
And that interaction was a little different. I'm not going to go on air because it wasn't a positive one. But when I got to meet him much later in my life, it was a very positive interaction with him. But the first time I met him, it was even worse. It was like, he's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like.
For those of you listening at home and not viewing, that was the.
It was an awkward silence.
All right,
I
Nick.
know that awkward silence. I'm familiar with it.
She in her introduction of herself, she listed her entire bibliography. You get the next question at 19.
I know. I love it when our hosts do that, because then we don't have to. We can go off script a little bit. It's great.
Excellent.
But moving forward, why don't we talk a little bit about Baba Ali and the Clockwork Gin? God, I hope I said that right. I have such a horrible tongue. A steampunk fairy tale, right? Where did you get the premise for this universe?
The nice and easy thing is, hey, guess what? We're borrowing from 1001 Nights. So we borrowed from the Arabian Nights. So it is Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. And so that was the basic plot line of what we wanted to do, but we wanted to stick to the original storyline, which if you go back to some of the old folklore stories of that, one of the versions is called Clever Morgiana, because Ali Baba's slave girl is the one who basically is the smart one who figures out the bad guys and saves him and everything else. And so we're going to borrow from that version and a few other things from that. And then the other part we did was put the setting in the Middle East. And we were looking at, all right, what time period? Somewhere around the 1880s. Let's look around that time period for the technology. And then going, all right, how would the world develop? And so we have Europe in the midst, in the beginning. Actually, it's more close to the beginnings and middle of an industrial revolution. And so let's talk about the rise of technology in England and Europe, and magic being pushed to the fringes. And then we talk about the Middle East, where let's talk about the fact that even in modern day, running a tank in the desert is not something that works very easily, because that sand gets everywhere, and technology still has a hard time keeping up.
It's everywhere outside of the tank too. I'll tell you that.
Yep, it has a hard time with the environment, so technology wouldn't be as great there. So magic would be higher. And then we built a world. So with the Far East had actually managed to be able to meld the two together. And so the idea of how the societies would rise that way. Jerusalem was and is the home to the three great faiths, right? And so I'm like, well, and if you look at the maps of the time, the city was separated completely into the Jewish portion of the city, the Muslim portion of the city, and the Christian. And I'm like, well, all three of those faiths, let's say, have ties to mysticism. So let's say the three great schools of sorcery are in Jerusalem as well. And so it was nice to be able to build out the world based on how technology would impact it, also with things of history, the wars between Turkey and Persia, and how would those have messed with it. But a lot of it was set in the Najd part of what would be Saudi Arabia, which is not going to have a lot of people, and also not going to be as heavily influenced by some of the politics going around. So we didn't have to worry about that kind of interference. So that was a very long answer that hopefully was kind of interesting.
No, it absolutely was. I'm not sure if you answered my next question or not, JR.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, cool.
It's interesting because all of us have been to the Middle East, so we've walked in those sands. So it kind of gives a little bit of flavor.
Well, the coolest part was being in Iraq, outside of Baghdad, being a student of history and art, because I was an art major, and being able to see the Akkadian head there at the museum in Baghdad.
Oh man!
Something I only got to see
the jealousy.
On the PowerPoint.
It is coming through the screen right there. That's the jealousy flying right
I got
through.
mocked and ridiculed for weeks. People are like, oh, look at Garber. He's totally simping over a lost wax casting. And I'm like, dude, do you know the historical significance of this thing? He's like, well, I'm sure you're going to tell me, dork. And I'm like, well, I am going to tell you.
So for me, it was the Urgot. It's the Temple of Ur, which was at just off of Camp Cedar 2, which is halfway between Baghdad and the Kuwaiti border, which the legend says that's where Abraham of the Bible was buried. But that was kind of cool because you could see where it was an old temple, and then they closed it in. And the old stone versus new stone, old and new being relative terms for something that old. And then when you get all the way to the top, you can see the blood stained on the copper of the blood staining the stones, even all these generations later from the blood sacrifices they did up there. And then you're up there and you can see the city that Abraham would have been lived in, covered in sand because they just leave it covered. But you can see the outlines of the walls. It was a moving experience, touching history like that.
Yeah,
but we're nerds and we're probably lost half the audience right now. So
no. We have to assume that there's more like us than there are not like us.
85,000 every year in Dragon Con.
There we go.
All right,
they keep throwing money at this show.
All right, Nick, it's your favorite question now, so I'm going to bring this up.
I love
for
this
you.
question. That's the only reason I have a job here is the artwork, the cover. All right, so can you tell us about this cover? Did you have any type of say in it? Did you give any notes?
Not a ton, actually. The co-author actually did this. I think her husband did. Because we talked a lot about what we wanted on the cover. And I think our biggest thing is we really didn't want the woman to be super, super pale. So that was the biggest thing. And I'm like, I really don't want it to be a white woman. So that was pretty much the biggest thing.
Nothing against white women for our listeners. It just doesn't fit with the historical aesthetic of what a human being in that region looks like.
Right. If the main character is listed as a brown-skinned woman, it would probably make sense to have her be a brown-skinned woman. So, no false advertising.
No, what I really like, what I like about it is it has a mosaic to it. It's set like a mosaic, and those.
It looks like artwork native to the region.
Yes.
If they encountered Leonardo da Vinci, most mosaics aren't that intricate, but this is really cool, and I like that that texture that it gives to it. It really
a little bit different, yeah.
Just a little bit different.
I would push back a little bit on the not that intricate, because some of what they found in northern Africa was pretty intricate from what was left behind when the Romans were conquering.
We're talking about Renaissance realism placed on a mosaic. No.
See, now you're going to go all artsy on me, and you've lost what little bit of knowledge I've got.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to hammer you I'm going to crush a fly with a sledgehammer, because this has to be said.
I would say it reminds me a lot of needlepoint also.
I could see it.
Like
I could see that, yeah.
A lot of needlepoint, and it's always so funny because growing up in the Middle East, I never thought of Middle Easterns as not white. So, I know that sounds really weird, but to me, because I was told they were all Caucasian because they identified themselves as that where we were in the region we were. So I know that it can be very regional. So.
Right, and you're going to hear things like that. Part of that is leftover colonialism, and part of that is also just if you think about the American census system up until this last round, if you were Arab, you were listed as Caucasian.
You still are, according to the Department of Defense and the DHS. It's how do they put it? Middle Eastern, non-Hispanic, white.
There we go.
It's very. I'm like, okay, so what do we put here? They're like, just select that one. I'm like, that don't sound right though.
Yeah. So at least the census, I believe, has changed this round. We'll hopefully DOD and DHS will get there
eventually. But we're talking about government, and government always moves at a
glacial pace.
Yeah, glacial pace. So. Perhaps in the year 2050, we'll get to something close to it.
So one of the things that struck me about the locals that we interacted with when I was overseas in the Mesopotamia was how friendly to newcomers their culture was. Like, it was a big deal for them to like, oh, let me bring you home for dinner, and they didn't have much, but they were gonna feed you. So did you incorporate some of that culture into the story when you wrote this fictional story, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think incorporating culture in general was one of the biggest things we wanted to be a part of it. I remember some folks are like, man, there's a lot of like religion and faith in here. I'm like, it's a part of everyday life for folks, and it may not be proselytizing to other folks all the time, but as far as personal actions and belief systems, it is part of everyday life. And it is true for a large number of people, not just Muslims, but for others where faith guides a lot of the decision making. And it's a big, if it's such a big influence on people, then it would make sense that it would exist in the book as well.
It's a huge influence. One of the things my mom, because my mom was very active in the Middle Eastern community where we lived, and she lived there for 20 years. It's the longest place she ever lived, growing. And it was how there's a lot of aspects of Middle Eastern culture at times that are similar, though the dressing is different to Southern culture, where religion's hugely important in this. Like, if you're in the South and you don't practice a religion, people look at you weird. Like, it can be paganism and they're okay with it as long as it's a religion.
Right.
So,
and that's the same. My mother was born in Missouri, spent more than 20 years in the Middle East. And many folks ask me when, because I actually was born there, raised there, came here to go to college. So lack of accent hides that. But people are like, wow, was it a shock? I'm like, so I moved from a conservative Middle East to a conservative Midwest. No, it actually was not very different at all. Just a matter of the different faith. And the same for my mom as well. We just from here to there. So it's exactly what you said.
Yeah. Well, the funny one is my mom, because my mom lived there from the 70s to just after Desert Storm. And during that time period, because Southerners, we have that thing called the debutante system, which is a way of, And I was actually a debutante. I know everybody can guess.
What? You still have the dresses?
I did one party. I negotiated it. But my mom.
Hey, everybody chip in to buy us a coffee so we can get a debutante dress for Cisca so she can wear it on one of our episodes.
Oh, yay.
I second that motion. Did you have a tiara too?
What?
Did you have a tiara too?
No, we didn't wear tiara.
You uncultured.
Did not wear tiaras. But my mom actually had a bunch of people who would come to her and ask her about how the debutante system worked because they were trying to find ways to update kind of the arranged marriage thing. Like my best friend had an arranged marriage, and was only 2 weeks younger than I was. So, but they were trying to find ways to update it, but not culture shock themselves either. So it was always interesting. Some of my parents' stories from dealing with it. So. Anyway.
All right. So now it's the time to go into the land of make-believe and say Gail Simone walks into you in an elevator and she says, I'm going to make your book into a movie. What's the 30-second elevator pitch? No pressure.
Why you got to come a day like that, dude?
Yeah, I would be like,
so I got the story. See what happened.
Yeah. It'd be like my answer, just what you just heard.
Like you just heard her tell a story about how she was like,
Here I was trying to be all sophisticated with my callback, and you're just like, smack right all over.
Yeah,
it.
but you gotta know your guests, you gotta know your audience. That is horrible. That's like asking me, like, hey, Jim Lee comes and wants to hear your $30 or your 30-second elevator pitch, and I'm like, he has a cowl.
I don't know anybody in Hollywood. Like I tend to read more than I watch like TV or movies. So like I couldn't tell you like.
Jared, have you ever had to give a 30-second elevator pitch?
It's
worse than MEPS, okay? It's worse than MEPS.
I mean, I had to justify a mission we went on in 30 seconds because they were going to say no.
That's different, man. You had no. I'm sorry, Dave, for my co-host here.
Yeah, I've now been re-traumatized because now I'm picturing in an elevator with her and frozen.
Okay,
completely.
okay. How about
just ask to touch her hair? It works every time.
Wait, I got this.
Every time. Can I touch?
I'm
can I
done
touch
now.
your hair?
I can't talk anymore.
She falls for it every time. That's how I get through it.
Okay, I got this. Hartness calls you and he says, "Give me your 30-second elevator speech." What do?
Wait,
for those who are listening, like John Hartness, who runs Falstaff Publishing, he calls and says, "Give me your fucking 30-second elevator speech now, damn it," because you know that's how he would say it.
And we still maintain a PG-13 rating.
Can I pause and go, yeah, this is me going to sidestep slightly again. Well, no, because there are several kinds of pitches and it depends on what you're looking for. And do you want a pitch deck to go with it in preparation? Yeah. And are you talking fiction or documentary? So
we're talking book format, and books don't normally have pitch decks.
Oh,
I know that much.
Very nice.
Damn, look at me just lost out of the conversation. Okay, I'll hit you up later, Cisca. So
pitch decks are for
I don't sound like an idiot next episode if that ever comes up.
So, okay, and I'm sorry, I completely forgot. What was the question again?
Your 30-second elevator.
Your elevator pitch
for a book to be made into a movie?
No,
for a book
to be published. You're selling your book to be published.
Oh,
like,
now I'm gonna have to come out with another book. Are you crazy?
No,
you talk like I have these at my fingertips, ready to go.
You really need to rework these questions. She is throwing us curveball after.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Satellites are hooking up and out of space.
How about this? But I will give you one that has been on my list that I want, which is probably not quite a book, which is I think it is more than past time to do, if not a movie, a TV series on damage control. So for those who are not familiar,
about the Marvel book that deals with
Dwayne McDuffie.
Yeah.
So
there's actually talks of a series coming out.
I have heard that. I am so hopeful, and if it's not true, or even if it is, I want in. I would love to write for that.
After
do a spin-off books.
After Spider-Man: Homecoming, there was serious talk about doing a damage control series.
It would be fantastic. So for those who don't know,
I'm all in.
Yeah, it's a comic book series that was written by Dwayne McDuffie. He's actually one of the very, very few Black comic book writers, and brilliant.
Super cool dude too.
Creator of Static Shock. And what damage control is it's basically if you like, remember earlier I talked about superheroes trashing the city. This would be like the insurance company that comes in, and the companies that come in, the construction companies that make the repairs and things like that. And later on, it expanded to include other teams and folks. But it's always the aftermath, which I thought was very powerful pieces of story that were missing. So I would love to write damage control. I'd love to write about.
Not a far stretch for that, because we had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for like 6 seasons.
Right. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. talked about the folks on the ground, and we got to see some of the emotional. So what if we were talking about a group of, let's say, B-grade heroes, insurance folks who are then dealing with families who've lost folks, buildings crushed, their businesses, and like, we're going to rebuild it. We've got this guy here. He's not strong enough to really do superhero stuff, but he's going to help move the debris.
Right.
And use that to just, here's a woman with she's just got sort of X-ray vision. We go around and she does all the architectural reviews to make sure all the buildings are sound from an engineering standpoint.
Because they did have those characters in the book. You had they weren't powerful enough to go out and defend against, to give up life and limb to fight off Thanos or anything like that. It's like, no, you're going to help us do insurance claims adjustment by gauging structural integrity of buildings that were wrecked by the Hulk going ape crap through the city. But we're going to pay you well.
There we go. And there's so many kinds of stories that you could put in that kind of world. So you want to pitch? That's what I would like to pitch. Is I would like to write damage control, whether it's spin-off books, movie, series, it doesn't matter. McDuffie did a brilliant job. For those of you who prefer to watch things on TV, take a look at the old animated series Justice League Unlimited.
I love
this
that.
Is where I do my Thor from Endgame, pull my axe right close to her head, and be like, I like this one.
So that is not where I thought you were going when you said damage control, because you were Coast Guard. I was thinking actual people that fix the ship when it's broken.
That would be kind of cool too, actually.
One of my favorite
you can totally do a book on that.
One of my favorite audiobook series is the Tom Stranger Interdimensional Insurance Agent.
So one of my MOSs when I was in the Army was actually watercraft operator.
12 of them.
Only 3. So I was watercraft operator. So we actually had to go through the Navy's damage control school. And I just remember, because we had a set of twins that are in our class that were 4'11". I don't know how they were tall enough to get in.
Oh, wow.
And damage control.
Male or female?
Female.
Well, there you go.
And the damage control, they tell you that the way you win on the damage control trainer is if it gets to the neck of the shortest person, it's over. You weren't fast enough. And of course, I had both of them on my team. I'm like, why can't I get the tall people? so we had even less time because they were so short.
Why didn't you pull a Kirk and just change the conditions of the test, the Kabayashi Maru?
Because he's not that cool.
We did. We sort of snuck into the control room and slowed the water down. Because it's the SS Buttercup, which is basically a PT boat in a pool. They call it the Buttercup because it's a trainer. And so we sort of snuck in before the session started and slowed the speed of the water so we had extra time.
Did you pass?
We didn't get caught.
Okay, good. Because if this story ended in failure,
well, I mean,
I don't know how I was going to chastise you.
If listening, we're sorry, but we didn't get caught at the time.
You ain't cheating, you ain't trying. If you got caught, you weren't trying hard enough.
All right, so back to your books, because Harkness will be very mad if we don't pimp your stuff, apparently.
Definitely got to pimp stuff.
So what makes Bobby, how do you say that? Let me try this again. Baba Ali, what makes it special?
Wait, Baba Ali or the Labyrinth Archivist? Because the Labyrinth Archivist is actually the one out of Falstaff.
Oh.
I have 2 different publishers, so.
I only found the Baba Ali when I went looking for you. You were kind of hard to track down on the internet.
Oh man, I have to work on
She's
that.
all disappointed. Like, my stalkers are so disappointed right now.
I know. I have to work.
So you need to hire some minions. Is what we need to get you earning enough money you can hire some minions. That's the solution.
I work for Free Comic Books and Literature. Just put my resume out there.
I can do that. I have a
I
pretty
am the
good
easiest
collection.
minion ever.
I was like, I have a collection I can pare down a little bit, get rid of some comic books. Wait,
I'll
do you
take
require
various copies.
floppies or you take trades?
I'll take trades.
Excellent.
See, now they're getting very nerdy, but it's okay. We like
I
nerds
have no
here.
idea what they're talking about. I assume it's comic book.
Finally, someone that speaks English.
I don't either, Doc. So we're on the same page. So what
I'm
makes,
wearing the glasses. I got to do a Tony Stark line. I'm sorry.
what makes Baba Ali special in the wild world of steampunk? What makes you stand out?
So I would say three things would probably make that story stand out as relatively unique. One was we made sure that faith was a part of it because faith was important to the character. It's important to that part of the world. It's also one of those things that I think tends to get left out of a lot of not just steampunk, but science fiction and fantasy. It's the idea is like we have moved into a post-religion world. And I'm like, yes and no. I'm like, people have gazed at the stars and written on walls and believed in higher beings for a long time. And as I said, it influences so many parts of people's lives. It's like leaving out economics and what kinds of
I don't
foods.
really see it stopping.
Right. So we wanted to make sure that was a key part of it because that was a key part of it.
Sewn in the
that
fabric of humanity.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. And so it bothers me when I don't see that in books. Two was just the location of it, having it be a non-Western setting. I think it gets a chance to show off that part of the world, which doesn't really get a lot of visibility very often. And I use the same thing in the Labyrinth's Archivist, which, yes, it's a fantasy, but it's based very much on Middle Eastern society. And there's enough cues in there. People are like, oh, wait, I know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, that is there. Because I wanted to have that there. So it's faith. It was part of the world. And the third was I really enjoyed basing it off the original like folklore and the older 1001 Nights. So because most of us have seen the Disneyfied versions, I'm like, no. We're gonna go back to the old gory, bloody stories, of people being cut up and their bodies cut into pieces and left as a message, and thieves actually having burning oil poured on them as they hide in oil jars. I'm like, let's get to the real nastiness. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember looking at my mom in when Aladdin came out, and I'm like, that's not the punishment for thieves, because I knew what the punishment for thieves in Saudi Arabia was.
Yeah.
At 8, and she goes, "Welcome to Hollywood, dear."
Yeah.
No, didn't they try to cut his hand off in the cartoon?
I don't know. It's not. I think I may have been watching the cartoon, not the movie, at the time. They got to quit remaking crap. I'm telling you, I'm losing track of what they've made.
Which version? What happened? Yeah.
So, what tropes do you think Baba Ali hits the best?
Oh, I love tropes.
Ooh.
Delicious.
If I owned a Baskin Robbins, that would be a flavor of ice cream.
There we go. We do have the traditional prodigal son returns home. So
love it.
So that would be one of the biggest ones. I'm trying to think of what else we
I think
have.
all veterans like that, because veterans kind of are prodigal sons if they ever come, if they come back after the service and stuff. Like some don't ever move back to Georgia, for example, but some of us do.
It's that different. Yeah.
It's hot, and you have a lot of
I
pollen.
reread the Odyssey and the Iliad while I was in Iraq, so that
you had time to read.
Dude, I was a sniper. You have all kinds of time.
I tried to read, but they got really mad when I was reading and driving.
You got 6 days of boredom and like 30 seconds of coolness, and then another 6 days of boredom. I had time.
I had sick people.
That's not as cool. So,
yeah, and I used to read like Cisca.
So steampunk isn't something we've dove into yet since we rebranded, and it was a very we did one short story review on our old version of the podcast, but it's not something that you see a lot of in literature. It's an aesthetic that people dress for, as far as like cosplay, but you just don't see a lot out there in that vein, mostly because conventional wisdom says it doesn't make money, but it's cool.
That's because you're not reading comic books, my friend.
Well, apparently I'm just not as cultured as you.
You absolutely are not. I agree with you.
So what is it that do you think steampunk? Do you think that's a fantasy subgenre? Do you think it's sci-fi? Or do you think it can go either way?
Actually, it is. It fits very much in science fiction. So if you think of it as a form of retrofuturism, then absolutely is. It has the emphasis on technology, and it has because that has to play a key element in the way the story is told. And just where, if you think about science fiction, especially going back to the early discussion, we talked about Trek, right? Star Trek, and the idea of hope as a part of it and what the world is like. Most steampunk is set around the early industrial revolution. It's the early age of science. It's new discoveries and new explorations every day almost. So it's this idea of what's out there. So it has some of that same idea that science fiction has. So in many ways, they're kind of the same thing, only in one, you're kind of rewriting history, and you're also making up science, only not necessarily accurate science.
Did you have a dirigible?
I love dirigibles.
Airships?
We did have an airship because it wouldn't be steampunk if we didn't put one in.
Is that how you say it?
I had a lot of fun with that. It's the Thaddeus Lowe, named after America's first great aeronaut, Thaddeus Lowe, who tried to convince Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln, that he needed to use airships during the Civil War. And he got him to put a little money towards using them for observation.
Balloons, the Hawkeye program.
But it didn't do particularly well. It got away from him, and it ended up being floated over into Southern Territory. And he ended up
either floated away or the Confederates shot them out of the sky.
Well, at the time, it was pretty hard to get them. They weren't quite accurate enough to reach them at that point.
No, but at certain altitudes, they had to use a cannon. I give them that, but
that's true. You could, but at the time they were just used for observation, and unfortunately he wasn't able to take advantage of that. And he wasn't quite as convincing as he wanted to be. But the fact that Lincoln had an Air Corps was just kind of this neat thing, and so the ship in ours was named for him. And then the idea was, well, how are we going to describe this ship? And it's like, so do we base it off the Hindenburg, which is the most infamous, the British R101, which was the largest. And we decided we're going to base this on the Graf Zeppelin, which is the probably most successful airship of all time. If you've looked at any of those old images of an airship over the pyramids, or an airship over Jerusalem, or in New York, and over the Arctic or the Antarctic. I think it's the Arctic. Those are all the Graf Zeppelin. It's all the same
late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yep. Yeah. So we cheated a little bit on the timing of it, but all of those were hers. She had a mail run across the Atlantic. She was all the in style. Had a very famous captain for many years. And it was just kind of a neat story. And the thing is, that ship got its own ticker tape parade in New York City. It was that famous. And so I was able to, there's video of it, and there's photographs of the interior. So if you were to look at the descriptions in our book and put them up against the photographs, it's going to look pretty similar, because really it's all based on the Graf Zeppelin. And the sad thing is, when it came time for World War, she was melted down to be turned into airplanes. So, because Germany wanted the steel.
That's
all right. So I shared a picture
fan of history. I see you are.
I shared a picture of a steampunk dirigible. I couldn't find a good quality enough image of the Graf Zeppelin, but this is sort of what we're talking about for you guys watching on the YouTubes. And I'll leave that up for a few seconds as we continue this discussion.
Yep. And if you're curious, you can take a look at airships.net. And there's a whole bunch of fans of airships, and they collect photographs, video, history about all of these ships.
I've used that site a couple of times for some comic projects I've been assigned to do, and they wanted airships in there, and I'm like, okay, let's make something cool. Let me rip this off this website real quick.
And it's just a great resource. And I have to admit that kind of inspired me for a story that not yet written that I totally want to do, which is I want to do one where, instead of melting down, the original captain, who would have been in his 80s at the time, who was almost arrested because he absolutely was against what the German government was doing. Basically, before she's melted down, gets some of the old crew and steals the ship back and tries to take it, fly it to safety. Which, if you think about the time, this is a time where you have fighter planes, and he's trying to get a dirigible out of Germany. Would make for an awesome story.
If you want to make that into a comic book, let me know. I would love to draw the hell out of that.
It would be so much fun. And it's like, think about it. This is a man who flew this ship, for what, more than 20 years, I want to say, but a good long time. He's an older gentleman, did his best. And yeah, they almost had him killed because he was so much against the war. So I'm like, it's perfect. Let's have him try to steal it. And there was an American officer who actually flew on several of those trips, and I'm like, let's have the Americans come in and help him steal that ship. So
that would be awesome. So can you, onto the story of the book, can you tell us a bit about the main character of your book and what makes them unique and special?
Now we're gonna go, which one are we talking about? The one from eSpec Books or the one from Falstaff Press?
So we did this interview on Baba Ali. Like I said, we didn't find it, but the other one sounds good too. So we're definitely going to have you back. So when we get off air, we're gonna get you on the calendar
for the other book. So let's continue with.
This has been fun. So,
and we'll be bringing you back to discuss your other amazing book. And
we'll call it a part 2 if we have to.
We know what we're doing. Maybe
we should do a part 2. Let's just let's do a deep dive.
We know what we're doing.
We'll bring the drinks next time too.
No, I got you covered.
Okay, so
tell us about the main character in Baba, please. Save me from myself.
I sorry, no help
Saving you
here.
from yourself, Cisca, is one of the greatest failures in my podcast career. You were the Tony Stark to my Pepper Potts.
I'm not sure if that was a compliment.
It's not.
No.
So what about the main character for Baba Ali?
So, I actually wanted to have a character who was a pacifist at heart, who would prefer not to get into fights. And so there was a lot of that. And it's hard to make somebody an active character when you're like, nope, we don't want to get into that kind of fight. But it's something we wanted to keep in mind of his personality. And so we have that and the idea of solving puzzles, and using puzzle boxes as a way for him to garner information and trying to go from there to the next step of, all right, what does this mean? And then what does this mean with the treasure? And how do I then, free the genie, and then going on from there. But the idea of it being combining knowledge with faith and personal integrity, and then being able to use that to make your way in this world. That sounds so boring and more than a little naive, but at the same time, it's kind of one of those, it just kind of worked out that way. I guess I got kind of tired of reading about the jaded heroes. Not a Batman fan for that kind of reason. That's why I lean towards Superman. I want this idea of truth, justice, and the American way, the Boy Scout. I want someone who's doing this because they think that things are going to get better, can get better. And if not, guess what? It's my job to try to make it better.
That's fair. I think we need a lot of that in our world now. We need more of that versus the jaded superhero who's like, and why am I doing this? Oh, well, I'm going to do it anyways.
There's a difference between being the jaded superhero and being the reluctant hero, the one that doesn't want to be in the fight, the pacifist. But you come to a point where you're like, I can't sit here and just watch from the sidelines. I have to get involved somehow. That's the reluctant hero. And those are very interesting characters if they're done right. Daredevil's a reluctant hero. Punisher is a jaded hero.
Before we go down Nick's favorite alley of
comic books.
Yeah, see, and the problem is I'm not going to help because I'm happy to go right down that alley with him. I'm so sorry.
I've noticed.
Me and Day are going to hold hands, and we're just going to take you with us.
So we'll start giving you collections, a list of things that you absolutely will thoroughly enjoy reading. Trust me.
Punisher Warzone, Daredevil Chinatown.
So can you tell us about any of your amazing other characters? Like, who's your secondary character that you just love?
While she's thinking, I'm going to tell you, you've gotten to Doc when she starts doing the clapping, once everything she says is factured by the clapping.
It's horrifying when she's yelling at you.
Uh-oh.
But when I'm really angry is when I start doing this at you.
Yeah, but you somehow knife hand with the clap. I don't know how you do it.
Here's a good part. I'm not going to see the knife hand, so I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going. That's okay.
There is no stopping this woman, which is maybe one of the many reasons I love her.
There we go. That's why we get along. It works. Secondary character was actually Baba Ali's brother's wife. It's one of these things where when we first started out, it's like she's just this horrible, greedy, selfish person. And instead what it is we're going to change that a little bit and talk about a woman trapped in a relationship that she's not happy with. And the idea of where she is not respected and doesn't have power. And this is her emotional response to it. And then we see how she grows and changes and what it means when she does have responsibility kind of thrust upon her and where she rises to kind of accept, all right, yeah, I did some awful stuff, but this is what I've got to do to make it right. And I think that makes for a more kind of a complex, not quite villain, but definitely somewhat villainous, because the idea is like, she's not really bad. She's doing this because of these very specific reasons, which makes her a fun secondary character. Our actual villain, we wanted to just make a villain, and he is, and there's no question about that on that front.
Speaking of, because that's the next question, is tell us about your villain.
Bum, bum, bum.
So our villain, so is the head of the 40 Thieves, and it's one of these things where I go, when you look back and go, I wish I had been more clear in the story, because we know he's leading the thieves. We know he's been alive for a very, very long time, because that cache of jewels and gold and treasures that's in that cave was cursed. And so all of them are actually kind of stuck in this sort of limbo where they're alive, but they can't leave. And so they're trapped by kind of what the stuff that they have stolen. And in some ways, getting the puzzle box from Baba Ali is a chance for them to set themselves free. But this is also a guy who like heads up 40 Thieves, who's done it for 40 years, who's happy to be in charge and is perfectly happy to kill every one of those guys under him to get it, because he doesn't really value them or value life as a part of that.
Okay, that's a thoughtful answer. Okay, so speaking of characters, I'm gonna step all over Nick while he's thinking. I can see that thinking man phase, and we might be in trouble. But if your character is,
I was thinking of a prequel to her villain. I want to read about that.
See, I knew you were going those kind of places because you've got that dark, twisted mind that we know and love so well.
Well, I was sitting back just going like, man, it's like, what? How did he accumulate all that?
That is actually one of the leftover questions from the book that we didn't answer, was about that treasure. Which may or may not be coming, because we actually
was my follow-up
writing
question.
The sequel. Perfect. Right. Which is awesome. To start working on the sequel this year. So
no, that's cool, and I really enjoy that history and that mythology from that part of the world. And there's just so much stuff you can get into. And as a huge fan of Sinbad adventures when I was a kid, and then when I got done with the watered down version, move into the dark and gritty, get your hands dirty, slit throats, burn people type stuff. Just amazing mythology there. So, JR, please continue. I'm sorry. Step on your toes.
You're fine. You're fine, because I'm stealing your questions anyway. So, speaking of your book, back to Baba Ali, if your characters met you in a back alley after all the mean things that you did to them throughout the course of that novel, do you think you could take them if they challenge you to a sword fight? Are they going to get the best of you and beat the crap out of you?
Sword fight, absolutely, because Baba Ali used a staff, not a sword. So yes, I think I could kick the lovely peace-loving gentleman's ass. I feel really bad about it, but I'd still do it.
So you felt bad about it.
And finally, about the universe. In many worlds, the universe is much a protagonist. You've touched on it a little bit. Is there anything else about the worlds that it's written that we didn't ask that you want to spill about the universe of Baba Ali?
I think the biggest thing that I talked about a little bit, which is the fact that we went back to the older stories and the folklore, versus just the translation of the 1001 Nights. So on the website, there's a section called Book Secrets, and under Bob Ali and the Clockwork Gin. And what I do is when working on any book, I actually have a little post about here's the real history behind this, or here's an issue with that. And so one of the things I did was, all right, guys, almost everybody I know is reading the Burton translation of the Arabian Nights. And then what it is I laid out, I think, 4 or 5 different lines, and these are 4 different translations, and you can see how the language changed. And the Burton translation is probably one of the most misogynistic, racist kinds of things you will ever read. It's lovely poetic language, but it is super sexist and super colonialist and super those foreign swarthy types. And I'm like, what the hell is he saying? Sort of a thing. But you can actually see the difference. And I think that's one of the neat things in some ways about it is we didn't use his. We actually went to some older folklore types, tales and stories that mirror it, because there are dozens of variants of this that didn't make it into that collection that you can still find actually in parts of the Middle East being told orally today. And so we were pulling more from those than from that. But it's a lot of fun to see what the translation differences are. And I'm like, wow, you guys, really? That's what you did?
The cool thing is, because I did this as some of my my graduate work, is there's the technology to allow contact-free scanning of historic literature is allowing us to get stuff online, so more people have access to it. Because in the past, you're limited because a lot of the older stuff you've got to go through a clean room, you've got to wear the gloves. And it was hard to get access to it. So the average scholar just couldn't see it. And now that they have the technology to do the contact-free scanning, you've got entire college libraries getting their stuff like uploaded to the web. So just random scholar from his home basement or whatever could be reading through it, which broadens our horizons collectively, which I think it's a great time to write this kind of stuff for you.
Oh, it is. And there's all sorts of other fun things where more things are being translated than ever before. Because if you think about it, for folks who want to write about other parts of the world, it's really hard to find things in translation that hasn't come through 2 or 3 other sources, particularly when they were translated, because there was a big translation boom during the late Victorian period and things like that. So it's going to have a real colonialist vibe in there, and it's going to have some very skewed perspectives, which means you're going to be writing something that's probably not very great. And with new translation and things like that that you're talking about, and those scans now, guess what? More people have access to things like that than ever before, as well as got to give a shout out to all those volunteers, because you'll have a lot of libraries that'll scan stuff that are like handwritten. So when I was working on my first film, which is a Civil War documentary, there's a whole lot of like handwritten letters. If you've ever tried to read writing from the Civil War, it is really hard. And what's great is there have been folks who basically volunteer and actually type out the text. And so that's available online right next to the letters themselves. And so all those folks who are doing that kind of volunteer work, for those who then make films and want to write books, you make our research so much better.
And so, like she said, volunteering for the Coast Guard Auxiliary, you can volunteer to scan things at the library too. Service.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah, I think the Smithsonian even has a program where anybody in any part of the world can actually go. They'll go, here's a bunch of our letters and books and stuff. If you want to type in the text for us so we have it, you can do that.
Hope you can read cursive.
Yeah. Messy, blotched, well-folded cursive that's really faded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. We all know that every literary universe has its own internally consistent rules of science, technology, and or magic. What sort of tech could we expect from these books?
Or magic.
Or magic, but doesn't look like there could be some magic in there. I don't want to spoil nothing.
Yeah, it's they were tied pretty close together. We wanted to usually use sort more of an energy-based type system with regard to the magic, but we didn't get a chance to delve into it too much in this book. So most of the magic you see are things like that, which is attached to puzzle boxes or to machinery to be able to help make things operate. And the thing about most steampunk machinery, whether we like it or not, I'm like, it's not really quite going to work because it doesn't quite work that way. But we still tried to fit into that sort of industrial machinery type of a look and feel and get that aesthetic. So in some ways, as a subgenre, it is almost like cosplay of itself. But we wanted to have fun because the traditional, as a good example, the traditional route is, well, we're going to have stuff be fired by coal. And I'm like, nope, we're in the Middle East. So my mechanical camels are going to run on oil. That's going to be awesome fun. And actually, I don't want to do it straight oil. You know, if you had oil and then you put it through an alembic, what would that do? And it's like, well, nowadays we mostly use alembics for making whiskey, but you know what also works great when you run it through an alembic? You can get what's probably equivalent to jet fuel. So
You had me at whiskey.
So whiskey, jet fuel. And so, I'd be like, our camels run on whiskey now.
Doc is getting all excited by the science.
That's because they're Irish camels and
Irish camels hanging out.
Hanging out. They got their scully caps on. They're like, oi! A bunch of drunk camels run all over the place.
All right.
Of all the tech and magic you invented for your universe, which one would you want to have for like daily use? Like,
ooh.
my money's already on drunken Irish camels that run on whiskey.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're talking about that. That actually sounds kind of fun and awesome and messy because real camels are total assholes. So
They are.
Oh, yes.
mechanical ones would probably be equally so.
They want whiskey instead of water that was hanging off your cargo pocket. True story. I'll tell it later.
Yeah, or you would need that to be able to survive the camels. So, other than the fun of the mechanical, the camels, I do like the idea of the combination of magic and the puzzle boxes. So, I thought that was a neat thing that we added. I thought it was fun. I think the only other place where I've seen magic and puzzle boxes, although it wasn't as positive, was in the Hellraiser movie.
The lament configuration. I was going to ask you a question about how those puzzle boxes work.
Yeah, mine was based more on the Japanese style puzzle boxes, but yes, that was the only other one that I could find. And trust me, if you Google puzzle boxes and magic, that was it.
Oh yeah,
that
the
was
lament configuration from
is
Hellraiser.
The only one.
I'm a huge horror buff too. I don't know. We're gonna start having horror guests. I don't know. That's a totally different.
We can do that on another day.
I'll stick to the comic books because I'm more knowledgeable of that than horror. I'm just a casual fan of horror, even though I watch a horror movie every day.
The news is not what we call a horror movie. It may feel like it, but seriously.
I don't know. Hulu right now has some awesome stuff in their horror section. I suggest you check it out.
So assuming you had this drunken Irish camel with the scully cap on, how would you
Nick, whatever.
How would you abuse that technology if you had it? Because we all know, like, whenever we get the cool stuff like the magic wand or whatever, we do totally inappropriate things with it. So what are you gonna do with your camel?
So probably having camel races up and down DC's main thoroughfares is probably not that exciting, but it still would be awesome fun.
It's funny.
Dude, I would totally join you. I would go up to DC to do that.
If I saw a mechanical whiskey-driven camel with somebody
up and down
it,
Pennsylvania Avenue,
going through the drive-through of a Dairy Queen would be badass.
So you would have to teach the mechanical camels to jump over all the numerous potholes that your area has, though.
It's camels. They've got the great big wide feet for shifting sands and stuff. They should be able to handle potholes.
Yeah,
okay.
Big camel toes, man. They're good.
Okay. Doc, next question's on you.
So we covered the abuse of some.
And think mechanical camels, well, actually, they're better than protection dogs if you think about it.
Well, Nick's already said that he wants your camel to be named Nick. So I don't know. We're going to leave that there.
It's a drunken, whiskey-fueled camel. How is it not named after me?
There you go. Sorry. It's been a long day, and I'm just going to giggle for a second. Okay.
Right. So
Cher's got editing duty.
Does your universe have any other fantastical creatures besides the Jinn?
I would say yes, but I am not sure how far I want to go into that. How about that? I know we have Jinn. I know we have Jinn. I know we have the Ifrits, and I know we have the combination of mechanical and living.
That is totally fair because spoilers can ruin a book.
Part of it is I'm borrowing from folklore. And so depending on where we stay will depend on what gets brought in, if that makes any sense. So more than likely
Are
you'll
you
see
going to borrow
other
from other outside of European folklore? Are you going to borrow from other regions, like possibly Asian, Japanese type folklore for yourself?
Well, yeah, depending on where we are, because if you think about the puzzle box in the story, it was brought back from his dad, who'd been to China. Which, if you think about it, some of the stories and the characters anyway were from China. Actually, if you look at some of the original stories and folklore, and the names are definitely not Middle Eastern names.
No.
Yes.
No.
Okay, well, you answered the next question. So clearly, this
You're
interview
skipping ahead, Dave. You got to slow it down. We got a format here. Nah, we really don't. We just like to think we do.
So clearly, this interview is winding down because it's been an hour and a half. But before we wrap this up, was there anything about Baba Ali that we didn't ask that you want to tell us before we wrap this up?
Some BTS type stuff.
Oh, see, if I had some really good BTS stuff, and I just don't. I'm sorry. I will have better prep next time to give like.
Well, normally we send the questions.
Oh, you're getting a part two. You've already earned it. You've earned a part two.
So, Day, as we wrap this up, then can you tell our dear listeners or viewers over on the YouTubes how they can find you on the wild interwebs?
Woo! And clearly, I need to up my Google foo because I am not easily findable. It would seem. No. So the easiest way to find me is Day Al-Mohamed. So DayAlmohamed.com, which is our website. But guess what? I use that same name for Twitter and actually just about everything else as well. So you can find me there. You can find my happy little books on Amazon. And I will send a bunch of links to you guys to be put up wherever you would like to put things. But you do that. You can check out Baba Ali and the Clockwork Djinn, which is a lot of fun. Try something a little bit different for steampunk. And if you get a chance, also the Labyrinth's Archivist. So both have that Middle Eastern style aesthetic to them, but definitely different style stories. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're definitely going to have you back to talk about that. So we'll get with you once we aren't live to get that scheduled. So you can find us on our website, which is anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blaster tack and tack blades. Our Twitter is SF_fantasy_show. Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Sometimes we even remember to answer it. We have a Facebook group, facebook.com/Blasters and Blades Podcast. You can support the show over on anchor.fm or on the buymeacoffee.com/JR Handley and put in the comment section. It's for the podcast, and we will keep Nick supplied with his rot gut whiskey and whatever Doc's drinking
stuff.
because she's all over the place, and I'll be sober because someone has to be. All right, Doc, you can bring us home.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. For Nick, Garber, JR Handley, and myself, this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, how Pern is sci-fi, and all things that go boom.
I like this drink. I'll have another.